The Grand Deliberation Chamber was the largest structure ever built by living hands. It floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that could hold millions. Today, representatives from 47 species had gathered to discuss the fate of the newest civilization to reach the stars, humanity. High Arbiter Velthron stood at the center of the chamber. His body was tall and thin, covered in silver scales that caught the light. His species, the Silithine, had existed for over 100,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had predicted the outcomes of 3,000 wars with near-perfect accuracy. Their algorithms never failed. "The matter before us today is simple," Velthron said. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated into 1,000 languages. "The human species has refused to accept the terms of Concord membership. They reject our taxes. They reject our territorial claims. They reject our authority." A murmur passed through the assembled representatives. Some clicked their mandibles in anger. Others flashed colors of disapproval across their skin. The Galactic Concord had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. No species had ever refused them. Therefore, Velthron continued, the Council has authorized the hegemony of Krathvel to conduct a corrective intervention. War Admiral Krathvor rose from his seat. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin like gray stone. The Krathvel were the military arm of the Concord. They had crushed 200 rebellions. They had never lost a war. "My fleet stands ready," Krathvor said. His voice was deep and confident. 12,000 warships, the finest warriors in the galaxy. We will teach these humans their place. Velthron nodded and activated the display screen behind him. Numbers and charts appeared in the air, glowing with soft blue light. "Our algorithms have analyzed the coming battle," he said. "The results are clear." The chamber fell silent as the data appeared. Human fleet size, 340 vessels. Krathvel fleet size, 12,000 vessels. Human technology level, primitive, 3 generations behind Concord standard. Human weapons, basic kinetic systems, nuclear warheads. The predicted duration of battle, Velthron announced, is 4.7 standard hours. Predicted human casualties, 100%. Predicted Krathvel casualties, 0.3%. Laughter filled the chamber. It came in many forms, clicking sounds, whistling noises, flashing lights, but the meaning was the same. The humans were a joke, a minor inconvenience. They would be swept away like dust. In the far corner of the chamber, a single human sat in silence. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She had served humanity for 40 years, first as a soldier, then as a diplomat. She had seen things that would break most people, but her face showed nothing as she listened to the aliens laugh at her species. Beside her sat observer Yathala, a young historian from the Malorian species. Her skin was pale blue, and her large eyes watched everything with curiosity. She had been assigned to document this moment, the extinction of humanity. It would make an excellent addition to the Concord archives. "Ambassador Chen," Velthron said, his voice cutting through the laughter. "You have heard our analysis. You understand what awaits your people. The Concord offers you one final chance. Surrender now, and we will show mercy. Your species will be allowed to serve us. You will live." The chamber fell quiet. Every eye turned to the small human woman. Chen Wei-Lin stood slowly. She straightened her simple black uniform and looked around the room. She saw the amusement on their faces. She saw how little they thought of her people, and she smiled, just slightly. "High Arbiter," she said, her voice steady. "I thank you for your offer, and I thank you for sharing your analysis. It is very detailed." "Then you accept?" Velthron asked. "No." The word hung in the air. The laughter died. "I'm sorry," Velthron said. "I must have misunderstood. Did you say no?" "We respectfully decline," Chen said. She sat back down and folded her hands in her lap. "Please proceed with your war." For a long moment, no one spoke. War Admiral Krathvor stared at the human with something like confusion. His people had conquered 100 species. All of them had begged for mercy when faced with the hegemony fleet. None had ever simply said no. "You understand what you are doing?" he asked. "Your fleet has 300 ships. I have 12,000. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your drives are slow and primitive. You will die, all of you." Every human, on every world. Chen Weilin met his eyes without fear. Perhaps, she said. We shall see. Krathvor turned to Velthron. She is insane. They are all insane. They are afraid, Velthron said calmly. Fear makes species act strangely. In 4.7 hours, it will not matter. Their fear will end with their lives. He raised his hand, and the session was officially closed. The representatives began to leave, already forgetting about the humans. They were a small problem, soon to be solved. There were more important matters to discuss. Observer Yithala remained in her seat, watching the human ambassador. Something bothered her. Chen Weilin did not look like a frightened woman facing extinction. She looked like someone waiting for something. Ambassador, Yithala said softly. May I ask you a question? Chen turned to look at her. Of course. You know you cannot win. The algorithms are never wrong. Your people will die. Why do you refuse to surrender? Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned closer to the young historian. Do you know how long humans have been fighting, Observer? Yithala thought about it. Your species reached space only 200 years ago. So perhaps a few centuries of minor conflicts. Chen laughed softly. We have been killing each other for 100,000 years. Before we had cities, we had weapons. Before we had writing, we had war. We fought with stones, with spears, with arrows and swords and guns and bombs that could crack the world in half. She paused, and her eyes grew distant. We invented a weapon that could end our entire species, and then we lived with it for 100 years, every day wondering if it would be our last. Other species out here, they found peace first and weapons later. We found weapons first. We have always found weapons first. Yithala felt a chill pass through her body. What are you saying? Chen stood up and gathered her things. The session was over, and the Krathvel fleet would soon depart for Sol System. I am saying that your algorithms are very impressive, Observer. They have predicted 3,000 wars, but they have never predicted a war against us. She walked toward the exit, then stopped and looked back. You should come watch. It will be educational. Then she was gone, leaving Yithala alone in the empty chamber. The young historian sat there for a long time, thinking. She told herself that the human was bluffing, that it was just brave words from a doomed species. The algorithms were never wrong. The Krathvel had never lost. But something in Chen Weilin's eyes stayed with her. Something that looked nothing like fear. It looked like patience. 3 days later, Yithala requested permission to join the Krathvel fleet. She wanted to document humanity's destruction firsthand. It would be a historic moment. She had no idea how right she was. The Krathvel fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol System, and it was beautiful in its terror. 12,000 warships appeared in perfect formation, arranged in the ancient pattern called the Tide of Conquest. This formation had been used for 10,000 years. It had crushed every enemy the Concord had ever faced. The ships stretched across thousands of kilometers, their hulls gleaming with weapons and shields. War Admiral Krathvor stood on the bridge of the Tide's edge, the largest battleship ever constructed. Around him, hundreds of officers worked at their stations. Every one of them was confident. Every one of them expected an easy victory. Begin the approach, Krathvor ordered. Standard battle speed. We will reach the human fleet in 6 hours. The fleet began to move forward, deeper into the Sol System. In the distance, a small yellow star burned. Earth, the human homeworld, was a tiny blue dot that could barely be seen. Krathvor looked at it with contempt. Such a small world. Such a weak species. He almost felt sorry for them. Open communications, he said. Broadcast the standard surrender demand. His communications officer activated the system. Krathvor's voice boomed out across the void, translated into the human language. Humans of Sol System. This is War Admiral Krathvor of the Galactic Concord. You are guilty of defying Concord authority. Your fleet will be destroyed. Your worlds will be occupied. Your people will serve us. If you surrender now, your lives will be spared. You have 1 hour to respond. The message ended. The bridge fell silent, waiting. 1 hour passed, then 2. The humans did not respond. Cowards, one of the officers muttered. They are too afraid to even speak. Krathvor nodded. He had seen this before. Some species simply froze when faced with overwhelming force. They could not process their own coming death. The humans were probably panicking, running around their little ships, crying for mercy that would never come. "Continue the approach," he ordered. "Weapons ready. We will begin the attack the moment we are in range." On a smaller observation ship near the back of the formation, Yithala watched through a viewport. She had brought her recording equipment to capture every moment of humanity's last battle. It would make her famous among historians, but something felt wrong. She had studied thousands of wars. She knew how doomed species behaved. They ran. They hid. They sent desperate messages begging for peace. They did something. The humans did nothing. Their fleet, all 340 ships, sat in perfect formation near the fourth planet, the one humans called Mars. They did not move. They did not retreat. They did not even power up their weapons. They just waited. Strange, Yithala murmured to herself. Very strange. She turned to the Krathvel captain assigned to her ship. "Captain, may I access your sensor data? I want to study the human ships." The captain made a sound of amusement. "Of course, observer. Study them while you can. They won't exist much longer." Yithala connected to the ship's sensors and examined the human fleet. The ships were small and boxy, nothing like the elegant curves of Concorde vessels. They looked like cargo haulers, not warships. Their weapons were primitive kinetic cannons and nuclear missile launchers. Their shields were basic, barely enough to stop debris, and yet they sat there, perfectly still, as if they had no fear at all. 4 hours into the approach, a junior sensor officer on the tide's edge made a sound of confusion. "War Admiral," she said. "I'm detecting an anomaly." Krathvor turned. "What kind of anomaly?" "I'm not certain, sir. The human fleet still reads as 340 vessels, but I'm detecting additional signatures throughout the system. Thousands of them." A cold feeling began to grow in Krathvor's stomach. "What kind of signatures?" "They're small, sir. Very small. They were completely dark until now. No heat, no power, no signals. We flew right past most of them. They're scattered throughout the system, in the asteroid belt, around the gas giants, mixed in with natural debris." She paused, her voice growing uncertain. "Sir, I don't think they're ships." Krathvor pushed her aside and looked at the sensor display himself. His eyes went wide. Thousands of tiny objects filled the screen. They had been invisible before, drifting cold and silent through space. But now they were waking up. Power signatures flickered on across the system. Weapons charged in the darkness. They were everywhere. In the asteroid belt, massive railgun platforms came online, their barrels pointed at the Krathvel fleet. Around Jupiter's moons, clusters of missile stations began calculating firing solutions. Hidden among the ice of Saturn's rings, laser satellites powered up their targeting systems, and the Krathvel fleet was in the middle of all of it. "It's a trap," Krathvor whispered. The words felt impossible, but they were true. They turned their whole system into a trap. He spun to face his officers. "All ships, emergency stop. Raise shields to maximum. Prepare for..." He never finished the sentence. The first wave of kinetic rounds hit the fleet from 17 different directions at once. The railgun platforms in the asteroid belt had been drifting for decades, charging their weapons with solar power, waiting for this exact moment. Each round was a simple metal slug the size of a human fist, but they were moving at 10% of light speed. At that speed, they did not need explosives. Physics did the work. 200 Krathvel ships vanished in the first second. They did not explode, they were simply erased, torn apart by kinetic energy that their shields had never been designed to stop. The shields were built to deflect energy weapons, the standard armament of civilized warfare. No one in the Concorde used kinetic weapons anymore. They were primitive, outdated, barbaric. The humans did not care about being civilized. "Return fire," Krathvor screamed. "Target those platforms." But the platforms were scattered across millions of kilometers. The fleet's weapons could not hit them all, and more rounds were coming, thousands of them, raining down from every direction. Then something worse happened. The human fleet moved. All 340 ships performed a maneuver that the Krathvel had never seen before. They did not fly toward the enemy. They did not retreat. Instead, they simply vanished and reappeared inside the Krathvel formation. They had jumped. Not across star systems, as normal hyperspace travel worked, but across just a few thousand kilometers. Short-range tactical jumps. Impossible. No species had ever weaponized fold drives like this. Suddenly, Human warships were everywhere. Mixed in with the Krathville fleet like wolves among sheep, they opened fire at point-blank range, their primitive kinetic cannons tearing through hulls that had never been designed for close combat. Yithala watched from her observation ship as the Krathville formation fell apart. The neat, beautiful pattern of the tide of conquest became a chaos of explosions and debris. Ships crashed into each other, trying to maneuver. Friendly fire tore through vessels whose commanders could not tell enemy from ally. The humans moved through the chaos like ghosts, jumping in, firing, jumping out before the Krathville could respond. They never stayed in one place long enough to be targeted. They never fought fair. On the bridge of the tide's edge, Krathvor watched his fleet die around him. His hands trembled. His mind could not accept what was happening. "This is impossible," he said. "The algorithms predicted. The algorithms were wrong," his first officer said quietly. Outside, another 1,000 ships exploded in nuclear fire. The battle was only 3 minutes old. Fleet Admiral Joaquin Torres stood in the command center of the UNSC Thermopylae, watching the battle unfold on screens around him. His face was calm. His hands were steady. He had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. Around him, officers from 12 nations worked at their stations. Americans, Chinese, Russians, Indians, Brazilians, Germans, old enemies who had learned to work together when they discovered they were not alone in the universe. The petty conflicts of Earth seemed very small when you realized that something out there wanted to enslave your entire species. Phase 1 complete, his tactical officer reported. 2,000 enemy ships destroyed. Kinetic platforms are recharging. Enemy formation status? Broken, sir. They're trying to regroup, but our fast attack squadrons are preventing it. Torres nodded. Everything was going according to plan. The plan that humanity had spent 4 decades building. The plan that no alien algorithm had ever predicted. He remembered the day it all started. First contact, 60 years ago. The Conquered had sent a delegation to Earth, offering humanity a choice. Join as a servant race, or be destroyed. The politicians had wanted to negotiate. The military had wanted to fight. In the end, they had done neither. Instead, they had listened. They had learned. And they had prepared. "We can't outgun them," the first human strategist had said. "We can't outrun them. Their technology is generations ahead of ours. In a fair fight, we lose. Every single time. So they had decided to never fight fair. The doctrine was simple. If the enemy expected a fleet battle, don't give them a fleet battle. If the enemy expected you to fight in space, turn space itself into a weapon. If the enemy expected you to be civilized, remind them what civilization was built on. Blood, fire, and the willingness to do whatever it took to survive." Torres watched as another wave of human ships jumped into the enemy formation, fired their weapons, and jumped out before the Krathville could respond. The aliens were panicking now. Their communications were filled with confused orders and screaming voices. Their perfect formation had become a killing field. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "the enemy flagship is trying to broadcast a surrender demand. Should I respond?" Torres almost laughed. "A surrender demand? Now, ignore it." They had their chance. On the tide's edge, War Admiral Krathvor was not demanding surrender from the humans. He was demanding it from himself. "All ships, retreat," he screamed into the communications system. "Emergency hyperspace jump. Get out of the system." But the ships could not retreat. Hyperspace jumps required careful calculation and stable conditions. The fleet was in chaos. Ships were crashing into each other. Debris filled the space around them. Any jump attempt would end in disaster, and the humans knew it. They had designed the entire trap to prevent escape. The kinetic platforms were positioned to cover the retreat routes. The fast attack ships were herding the survivors into tighter and tighter clusters. Every Krathville captain who tried to run was cut down before they could build up enough speed. Krathvor watched 500 ships try to jump to hyperspace at once. 300 of them exploded when their calculations failed. The rest were torn apart by railgun fire before they could complete the maneuver. "How is this happening?" he whispered. "We had 12,000 ships. They had 300. The algorithm said. The algorithms were based on conquered warfare," his first officer said bitterly. "Standard formations, standard weapons, standard tactics. These humans, they don't follow the rules. There are always rules in war. Not for them." The first officer pointed at the tactical display. Look at what they're doing. They turned their asteroid belt into an artillery battery. They put nuclear weapons on automated platforms and scattered them through their entire system. They modified their primitive jump drives to do something we never imagined possible. They spent decades preparing for a war that might never come. He shook his head in something like admiration. They're not fighting us, Admiral. They're executing us. The 5th minute of the battle arrived. 8,000 Krathval ships were already destroyed. The survivors were trying to form a defensive sphere around the flagship, but the humans would not let them. A new wave of weapons activated. These were different from the railguns and missiles. They were called Kasaba howitzers, and they were the most terrifying thing humanity had ever created. The concept was simple. Take a nuclear warhead, say 50 megatons, shape the explosion with careful engineering, focus all that energy into a single direction. The result was a lance of plasma moving at 3% of the speed of light. Nothing in the galaxy could stop it. The Krathval shields were designed to absorb energy weapons. They could handle lasers. They could handle particle beams. They could even handle small nuclear explosions. They could not handle a focused nuclear lance that delivered all its energy in a single point. The first Kasaba howitzer hit a Krathval battleship and went through it like a needle through paper. The ship did not explode, it simply ceased to exist, vaporized by temperatures hotter than the surface of a star. Then another hit, and another, and another. Krathvor watched his battleships die around him. Ships that had taken decades to build, ships that had conquered 100 worlds. They were nothing against these weapons. Target the source, he screamed. Destroy those platforms. We can't, Admiral. They're scattered across millions of kilometers, and our weapons can't lock on. The humans are using some kind of jamming technology. Of course they were. The humans had thought of everything. They had planned for every possibility. They had known exactly what the Concorde would send, and exactly how to destroy it. This was not a battle. This was a slaughter. Torres watched the enemy flagship on his screen. The Tide's Edge was a magnificent ship, nearly 10 kilometers long. It had survived 100 battles. It was the pride of the Krathval hegemony. It was surrounded by 50 human destroyers that had just jumped into point-blank range. All ships, focus fire, Torres ordered. Take down that flagship. The destroyers opened fire simultaneously. Kinetic rounds, nuclear missiles, and laser fire converged on the Tide's Edge from every direction. The great ship's shields flickered under the assault. They held for 3 seconds. Then 4. Then they failed. Krathvor felt the ship shudder around him. He saw the hull breach warnings flash across every screen. He saw his crew dying at their stations as the atmosphere vented into space. He thought about his people, about the hegemony, about 10,000 years of victories, all of it ending here, against a species that had barely learned to leave their own planet. How? He whispered. It was his last word. The Kasaba howitzer hit the Tide's Edge from below, burning through deck after deck, turning metal and flesh into plasma. War Admiral Krathvor, conqueror of worlds, died in less than a second. He never felt a thing. Torres watched the flagship explode on his screen. He checked the time. 6 minutes and 30 seconds since the battle began. Enemy fleet status? He asked. Approximately 1,000 ships remaining, sir. They're signaling surrender. Torres was quiet for a moment. He thought about everything humanity had sacrificed to reach this moment. The decades of secrecy. The trillions spent on weapons that might never be used. The millions of people who had worked their entire lives on this project. Accept their surrender, he said finally. Cease fire on all ships that lower their weapons. But if anyone tries to run or fight back, destroy them. The order went out. Across the system, human ships stopped firing. The surviving Krathval vessels powered down their weapons and drifted, helpless. Torres looked at the clock one more time. 7 minutes and 43 seconds. The algorithms had predicted 4.7 hours. Humanity had finished the battle in less than 8 minutes. Torres allowed himself a small smile. Then he returned to work. There was still much to do. The battle was over. The real victory was just beginning. The battlefield was quiet now. Where 12,000 warships had once filled the void, only debris remained. Twisted metal tumbled through space. Frozen bodies drifted among the wreckage. The greatest fleet in galactic history had become a graveyard. Observer Yithala floated in her escape pod, watching the destruction through a tiny viewport. Her observation ship had been destroyed in the 4th minute of the battle. Caught in the crossfire between human destroyers and fleeing Krathval cruisers, She had barely made it to the pod in time. Now she drifted alone, surrounded by death. Her recording equipment had survived. She had captured everything. The trap, the slaughter, the end of the Krathvel hegemony. It would be the most important historical document in 1,000 years, if anyone ever saw it. Her pod had no propulsion, no weapons, no way to call for help. She had air for maybe 6 hours. After that, she would join the Krathvel, in death, a small blue alien body, lost among the wreckage of giants. She wondered if anyone would even notice. A shadow passed over her viewport. Yithala looked up and saw a human ship approaching. It was small and angular, painted in dark colors. A destroyer, she recognized. One of the vessels that had jumped in and out of the battle like ghosts. Fear gripped her. She had watched these ships tear through the Krathvel fleet. She had seen what their weapons could do. Now one of them was coming for her. She closed her eyes and waited for death. Instead, she heard a gentle thump as something attached to her pod. Then a hiss of air. Then voices, speaking in the strange rhythms of human language. The pod door opened, and Yithala found herself looking at 2 humans in spacesuits. They were young, one male, one female, and their faces showed no anger, no hatred, just concern. "Are you injured?" the female asked. Her translator device converted the words into Yithala's language. "We detected your life signs. Do you need medical attention?" Yithala stared at them. She could not understand what was happening. "You're rescuing me?" "Of course," the male said. He reached out a hand to help her from the pod. "Come on. Our ship has better air than this thing. And warm food, if you're hungry." Yithala took his hand and let him guide her into the human ship. She moved like someone in a dream, unable to process what she was experiencing. These were the same creatures who had just destroyed 11,000 warships, the same creatures who had killed millions of Krathvel warriors, and now they were offering her food. The destroyer was small but comfortable. The crew members nodded politely as she passed. Some even smiled. A medical officer examined her injuries, minor cuts and bruises from the escape pod, and treated them with gentle hands. Finally, Yithala was brought to the captain. He was an older human with dark skin and gray hair, sitting in a simple chair on the bridge. His name, she learned, was Captain David Okonkwo. "Observer Yithala," he said. "Welcome aboard the UNSC Defiant. I apologize for the rough circumstances of your rescue." "I don't understand," Yithala said. "Why did you save me?" "I was with the enemy fleet. I was here to document your destruction." Okonkwo's face showed something like sadness. "You weren't a combatant. You were an observer, doing your job. We don't kill people for doing their jobs. The Krathvel would have killed every human if they had won. Probably. But we're not the Krathvel." Yithala sat in silence, trying to understand. In all her studies, she had never encountered a species like this. They could be utterly ruthless in battle, she had seen the evidence. And yet they could show mercy, moments later. They could destroy a fleet and then rescue an enemy observer. "What are you?" she asked finally. "What kind of species fights like that, and then does this?" Okonkwo thought about the question for a long moment. "We're survivors," he said. "We've been fighting each other for 100,000 years. Wars over land, wars over resources, wars over ideas. We learned something in all that time. If you destroy everything, there's nothing left to live for. So you fight hard, you win, and then you stop. You don't keep killing when the killing is done. But you could have let me die. It would have been easier." "Easier isn't the same as right." Okonkwo smiled slightly. "Besides, you're a historian. Someone needs to tell this story. Might as well be someone who saw it happen." Thousands of light years away, the grand deliberation chamber was in chaos. High Arbiter Velthron stood at his podium, watching the sensor data stream in from the Sol system. His silver scales had turned pale. His hands trembled against the controls. The algorithms had failed. In 3,000 wars, the Celethine prediction systems had never been wrong by more than a few percentage points. They had accounted for every variable, every possibility, every outcome. They had predicted a 4.7-hour battle with human casualties at 100%. The battle had lasted 7 minutes and 43 seconds. The Krathvel casualties were at 94.7%. The human casualties were less than 1%. Everything was wrong. Everything was impossible. And yet the data did not lie. Around him, Representatives screamed at each other. The Krathville survivors were demanding revenge. The smaller species were panicking, wondering if they were next. The ancient powers were trying to understand how everything they knew had just been proven false. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin sat in her usual corner, watching it all with calm eyes. Velthron turned to her. His voice was barely a whisper. "How did you do it? How did you defeat us?" Chen stood and walked to the center of the chamber. The shouting died down as everyone turned to watch her. "You made a mistake," she said simply. "You looked at our technology and saw that it was primitive. You looked at our fleet and saw that it was small. You ran your algorithms and saw that we would lose. And you believed it." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But you never asked the right question. You asked whether we could beat you in a fair fight. You never asked what we would do if we couldn't. What did you do?" Someone shouted from the crowd. "We cheated." Chen shrugged. "We lied. We hid our real weapons. We made you think we were weak, so you would become confident. We let you walk into our system thinking you had already won. And then, we destroyed you." The chamber fell silent. "That's not honorable," Velthron said. "That's not how civilized species fight." Chen laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Civilized? You came to our world and demanded we become your slaves. You threatened to kill everyone we love. And you call yourselves civilized?" She shook her head. "We are not civilized, Arbiter. We are survivors. And survivors do whatever it takes to keep surviving." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. "Your algorithms failed because they were built on assumptions. You assumed we would fight like everyone else. You assumed we would follow rules. You assumed we would be afraid." Her voice grew hard. "We have been afraid our entire existence. We have lived with fear for 100,000 years. It doesn't stop us anymore. It just makes us more dangerous." The chamber was completely silent now. "The Krathville fleet is destroyed," Chen continued. "Your military power has been broken in a single battle. Right now, you are probably thinking about revenge, about gathering more ships, about coming back to finish what you started." She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I would advise against that." "Is that a threat?" Velthron asked. "It's a fact. You sent 12,000 ships and we destroyed them in 8 minutes. We were ready for that number. We've been ready for 20 years. She paused. "Do you want to know what we've been building for the other 20? No one answered. "We are not your enemies," Chen said finally. "We don't want war. We just want to be left alone. Accept that, and we can find a way to live together. Refuse it." She turned and walked back to her seat. "Refuse it, and the next battle won't take 8 minutes. It will be over before it begins." Yithala watched from the observation deck of the human destroyer as they approached Earth. The blue planet hung in the darkness, beautiful and small. Hard to believe that something so fragile-looking had just defeated the greatest military power in the galaxy. She had spent hours talking with the human crew, learning about their history, their wars, their struggles. She was beginning to understand something important. The other species of the galaxy had evolved in relative peace. They had developed technology, built civilizations, and reached the stars without the constant pressure of survival. War, for them, was an occasional inconvenience. For humans, war was a way of life. They had been fighting since before they could write. Every advance in their history, fire, metal, gunpowder, nuclear power, had first been used to kill each other. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times. But somehow, they had survived. And now, all that accumulated knowledge, all that terrible experience, had been turned outward. The galaxy had no idea what it had awakened. "What happens now?" Yithala asked Captain Okonkwo. "Now? Now we see if the Concord is smart enough to leave us alone. If they are, everything will be fine. We'll trade. We'll share technology. We'll be good neighbors. And if they're not," Okonkwo's face grew serious, "then we'll teach them the same lesson we taught the Krathville. The same lesson we've been teaching each other for 100,000 years." He looked out at the stars. "We don't start fights, but we always finish them." Yithala nodded slowly. She understood now. She understood everything. She pulled out her recording device and began to compose her report. The galaxy needed to know what had happened here, what humanity really was, and what they were capable of becoming. 3 days had passed since the Battle of Sol, and the galactic Concord was falling apart. The grand deliberation chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from all 47 member species had come, not for a normal session, but to decide the future of everything they had built. The air was thick with fear and confusion and anger. High Arbiter Velthron called the assembly to order. His silver scales had lost their shine. He had not slept since receiving the battle reports. His algorithms, his life's work, had failed him completely. He did not know if he could trust anything anymore. "We are gathered to discuss the human situation," he said, his voice tired. "The Krathvel hegemony has suffered a catastrophic defeat. 94% of their fleet has been destroyed. War Admiral Krathvor is dead. The military backbone of the Concord has been broken." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding explanations, demanding action, demanding revenge. "We must send another fleet," a Krathvel general screamed. "Gather every ship in the Concord. Destroy these humans once and for all." "With what?" another voice called back. "They destroyed 12,000 ships in 8 minutes. How many would they destroy if we sent more? We have hundreds of thousands of ships across the Concord, and they have had 40 years to prepare. Who knows what else they are hiding?" The shouting grew louder. Velthron raised his hand for silence, but no one listened. Then a new voice cut through the chaos. "May I speak?" The chamber fell quiet. Everyone turned to see observer Yithala, standing at the witness podium. She looked small and fragile, but her voice was steady. "I was there," she said. "I watched the battle. I was rescued by the humans afterward. I have spent 3 days learning about them. I believe I can help you understand what happened." Velthron nodded slowly. "Speak, observer. Tell us what you learned." Yithala took a deep breath and began. "The algorithms failed because they were based on a false assumption. You assumed the humans would fight like every other species in the galaxy. You measured their ships, their weapons, their technology, and you calculated their strength, but you measured the wrong things." She activated a display showing human history. Images of ancient battles, medieval wars, and modern conflicts filled the air. Humans have been at war for their entire existence, not for thousands of years, like us. For 100,000 years. They were fighting before they had metal, before they had writing, before they had cities. War is not something they learned, it is something they are. The chamber watched in silence as images of human weapons appeared. Spears, swords, guns, tanks, nuclear bombs. They developed the ability to destroy their own planet. And then they lived with that ability for over a century, every single day, knowing it could be their last. Can any of you imagine that? Living your entire life with a weapon pointed at your own head, held by your neighbors? No one answered. That experience changed them. It made them understand something that we never had to learn. When you fight for survival, there are no rules. There is no honor. There is only winning and dying. She paused and looked around the room. They did not build a fleet to fight us. They knew they could not win a fleet battle, so they turned their entire star system into a weapon instead. They hid thousands of kill platforms throughout their space. They modified their primitive technology in ways we never imagined. They waited for 40 years, preparing for an enemy that might never come. Yithala's voice grew soft, and when we finally arrived, they did not hesitate. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply destroyed us, as efficiently and completely as they knew how. The Krathvel general stood up angrily. "They are barbarians, animals. You should do nothing," Yithala interrupted. "Because I have not told you the most important part yet." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button, and a new image appeared above the chamber. It showed her, lying injured in a medical bed on the human destroyer. Human doctors surrounded her, treating her wounds, bringing her food and water. After they destroyed 11,000 of our ships, they found my escape pod drifting in the debris. They could have ignored me. They could have let me die. No one would have known. She looked at the Krathvel general. "What would your fleet have done?" The general said nothing. "They rescued me. They healed my injuries. They fed me and kept me warm. They treated me with kindness." Yithala's eyes were wet now. "Do you understand what that means? They can be the most ruthless killers in the galaxy when they need to be, and they can be the most compassionate beings you will ever meet when they choose to be." She turned off the display. "That is what makes them dangerous. Not their weapons, not their tactics. The fact that they can switch between destruction and mercy in a heartbeat. The fact that they have complete control over both. The chamber was completely silent. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin rose from her seat and walked to the center of the room. She stood next to Yithala and faced the assembled representatives. "Observer Yithala speaks the truth," Chen said. "We are capable of terrible things. We know this about ourselves. We have spent our entire history learning exactly how much damage we can cause." She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. "But we did not come to the stars to make war. We came because we wanted to explore, to learn, to meet new species and share what we have discovered. We wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves." Her voice hardened. "You took that away from us. You came to our home and demanded we become your slaves. You gave us no choice. So we did what we have always done when our survival was threatened. We fought back." She paused. "Now, you have a new choice. You can accept that we are equals. You can respect our borders and our independence. You can work with us instead of against us. And if we refuse," Belthron asked, "then you will learn what we have been building for the past 40 years. And I promise you, the Battle of Sol was just the beginning." The chamber stirred uneasily. "We don't want war," Chen continued. "War is expensive and painful and wasteful. We have had enough of it among ourselves. But we will fight if we must. We will fight until there is nothing left. Because that is what survivors do." She pulled out a small device and activated it. A document appeared in the air above the chamber. "These are our terms. Full recognition of human sovereignty. Withdrawal of all Concord claims on our system. Renegotiation of all treaties as equals." She paused. "And one more thing. Any species currently under Concord protection that wishes to leave must be allowed to do so freely." The chamber exploded in angry protests. The Concord had held power over smaller species for millennia. Giving them freedom would destroy the entire structure of galactic society. "That is unacceptable," the Krathvel general shouted. "We will never." "You will," Chen said calmly. "Because the alternative is worse. Much worse." Belthron raised his hand for silence. The protests slowly died down. "Ambassador Chen," he said carefully, "if we agree to your terms, what then? Will you attack us? Will you seek revenge for the invasion?" Chen shook her head. "No, we have no interest in conquest. We just want to live in peace. Accept our terms, and we will be good neighbors. We will trade. We will share knowledge. We will help you when you need it." She smiled, and this time there was warmth in it. "We can be the best friends you will ever have, or we can be the worst enemies you can imagine. The choice is yours." The vote took 3 hours. Species argued and debated and threatened. Some wanted war. Some wanted peace. Some simply wanted to know how the universe had changed so quickly. In the end, the result was unanimous. All 47 species voted to accept humanity's terms. The Galactic Concord would never be the same. 6 months later, Yithala published her historical account of the Battle of Sol. It became the most read document in Concord history. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds downloaded it, wanting to understand what had happened. The final paragraph was quoted more than any other. "The Concord had conquered 1,000 species by teaching them to fear us. We believed that fear was power. We believed that strength came from making others weak. The humans taught us something different. They showed us that true strength comes from within, from the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect what you love, from the ability to be both terrible and kind, and to know when to be each. We thought we were the masters of the galaxy. We thought we understood war. We were wrong. The humans did not seek to destroy us. They did not seek revenge or conquest. They simply made us understand that destroying them was never an option. And perhaps that is the most human thing of all. They defeated the greatest military power in galactic history, and then they offered us peace. They showed us mercy we did not deserve. I do not know what the future holds for our galaxy, but I know this. With humanity among us, nothing will ever be the same, and that might be exactly what we needed." On Earth, Fleet Admiral Joaquin Torres read the document and smiled. They had won. Not just the battle, but something more important. They had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of, and then they had shown what humanity chose to be. It was, he thought, a good day for the species. Outside his window, the stars burned bright with possibility. Humanity had arrived, and the universe would never forget it.